Hi everyone, welcome back to Java 1 for All. In this video, we are going to talk about the return of methods. So far, we have been studying methods, and we know that we use void when we just want to tell whoever is calling this method that there will be no return. We are going to do something, we are going to execute, but we are not going to return anything. And we know how to get or ask for arguments by setting up parameters in the method description. And so far everything is like with no return, void. Now what we are going to look at is how to actually declare that we are going to return something. And for that we are going to create a new method here, public, and this is what's going to change. Here, instead of void, we can tell anything, any primitive type or any reference type, any object that we may have, and we just have to, for example, say that this method now is going to return a double. So you can use anything here, any primitive or reference type. We are going to see later how to work with reference types, both when returning and asking for arguments. And now we are going to divide two numbers, and same pattern. Actually, let's use a double. Okay, so as you can see, by creating the method like this, we get immediately a compilation error because we are missing the return statements. Every time we create a method that has a specific return that's not void, we have to tell that we are going to return something. And since we are working with doubles, we could return anything that can match a double. So all the rules that we had, for example, for creating a variable, for example, if we have an integer, yes, we can assign to a double. If we have a float, we can also assign to a double. Of course, double we can assign to a double, but for example, I cannot assign a string to a double. So if you try to return a string, you will get an exception saying that they are not compatible. So the rules for variables, they apply here as well, and I'm telling whoever calls these divide two numbers sending two arguments, num1 and num2, we are going to return the value 0. So let's see how that works in practice. So just go to the package B introduction methods, and let's create a new calculator test. 03, same process, psvm, call the calculator class to import on line 3, then give a name to this reference variable and create the object. So by creating calculator.divide two numbers, you can see here that we have now a return being, well, this hint coming from IntelliJ. I will give any numbers here, for example, 20 and 2. And by doing this and executing, we will have no results, but the code will work perfectly fine. Basically, what's happening here? When the code reaches this line, it's going to the divide two numbers. Not any difference from what we have seen so far. And then the line number 18 will be executed. So if I press Shift F9 and I execute, you will see this process. Now I am on the line inside calculator test 03, divide two numbers, and then I will press F8. And then you will see that we are going to return 0. And then we are going back to the calculator. But we are not doing anything with that return type. So if you remember the apple example, it's like you tell me, I would like you to cut this apple into pieces, and then I say, okay, I'm going to return you two pieces, and you just go away. This is basically what's happening here. So we just have to create a variable and store that return. So for example, I'm saying that now whatever is returned by divided two numbers will be stored in this primitive variable result. And then if we print the result, we will get the value 0. So the result that we have here is basically following the same rules that we have for creating variables. For example, now this is double, but if I would like to store the return of divided two numbers that is a double, and if you hold Control, you can see by hovering over the return type. So if I try to say, okay, I want to store an integer, and you of course have a compilation error because a double cannot fit into an integer, but you know how to solve that by doing a cast, and you'll get the same result in this case because the number is pretty small. So let's go back to divide two numbers, and going back here, we can divide num1 by num2. So as you can see, the result will be a double, and if we execute now, we will see the result 10. But the result that we have here needs to match whatever we have here. Remember, if I try to, for example, change here, this method now will be returning integer. Well, we have a problem because the result of this operation will be double. So you have one option that is casting everything, not just num1, but casting the whole operation. So the result of number 1 divided by number 2 will be converted to integer. And now we can return an integer, and in the calculator test, integer can fit into a double, so we don't have any errors happening here. So let's just go back to what we have. Let's execute to prove. Shift F10, still the result. But let's keep it as a double. Okay, but then remember in the previous classes that I said, well, we have no control over whatever is coming into the arguments. So for example, what happens if I try and I send 0 as the number 2? We will get division by 0, and Java will tell us infinity. Now, so far, you have enough knowledge to fix this problem, and basically what you have to do is check if the number 2 is 0. So how can we check? If num2 is 0, what I would like you to do, and then since we don't know how to work with errors yet, we can tell, okay, so if the number 2 is 0, I will just return 0, and I will not let Java try to do this math for us. So I will add a breakpoint here, and then I will come back and I will add a breakpoint here. Shift F9, and as you can see, we stopped at the calculator test 03 at the breakpoint, and then when I press F8, we are coming. Now let me go back. Let me put online 18. So executing again, then we press F8. It's going to execute this if, and it will evaluate if number 2 is 0. It is true, as you can see here in IntelliJ given this a nice hint for us. And then if I press F8, it will return 0, and if I press F8 again, you will notice that line 21 will never be executed. And then we have here the calculator test again, and the result that is 0. So the result not necessarily needs to be stored in a variable. I can copy this, for example, and duplicate the line with Ctrl D and say, okay, so instead of saving this result into a variable, I just want you to get this result and print directly into the console. So basically the shortcut for these two lines would be this one right here. So if I execute now, we will see 0 and 0, but if I send here 2, we will see 10 and 10. Actually here and here. Okay, so I think that's enough for this class. Let's continue in the next one. See you there.